Hello, and welcome to Startup Stories with Scaleway, where we explore cutting-edge startups around the world and how they leverage cloud computing technologies. I'm your host, Ethan Pierce, and today's guest is Gilbert Cabillec, founder and CEO at ScaleDynamics, a managed platform for developing and deploying front and back-end Node.js applications. Welcome, Gilbert.
Thank you, Ethan.
It's really great. We had a fun time kind of warming up and getting ready for our podcast here. I'm super excited to learn more about what it is that you do at ScaleDynamics. I dug through the website, which is really rich. There's a ton of information there about what you provide and the services and the value add and all of that. But to give our audience some context, I always like to start with kind of your brief elevator pitch so that we better understand what you do at the company. So maybe just, a short kind of pitch on what ScaleDynamics does.
Thank you. And I'm also super excited to present you. So let's say ScaleDynamics provides a new generation of platform to develop on the cloud for JavaScript people. It's 100% JavaScript oriented. It's developer first. And with our solution, there is an innovation that you don't have to develop the HTTP layers when you develop for the cloud. We take everything in charge, the HTTP layers and the automatic deployment and the management of the cloud. That's why it's a HTTP-less, fully managed cloud platform.
Yeah, I noticed on the website on the front there's an animation that kind of shows the difference between the code that you would write in Node.js without using ScaleDynamics, and then like the 1 to 2 lines of code that replaces all of that because of the efficiencies inside of ScaleDynamics. And I found that really fascinating. I know developers are always looking to be more efficient. You had a quote on the website that talked about deploying, I think, kind of like a sandbox or kind of beginning version to play with your front and back end of an application, and that you did that in just a number of days versus in a month, that would take 2 or 3 people, I think the quote said. So efficiencies are always super important to developers to be able to do things faster with a higher level of quality, less bugs, things like that. So I'm interested then in how you got there, because stories like this always kind of start with the problem that you were potentially having in another company or in another setting, and that you realized that you needed to build this solution. So I'm interested in how you got to building ScaleDynamics, maybe the team, the founders, any interesting anecdotes on what brought you to building this company.
In fact, it's a good story. So I had a chance to work for Google because I sold my first startup to Google in 2012. And I was in charge of the Android JavaScript chain for the Android platform team. And during that time, so I worked 7 years here. But during that time, at the end of this time, I had to build a new server to analyze all the benchmark results coming from, we do a patch on the compiler. We have to cross-check that we don't impact the code size, we don't impact performance, we are still compatible. So we had lots of huge tests and benchmark coming every day. And it was very hard to analyze the results. So I did a server to analyze regression statistics. And I'm a Java guy, but I decided to move to another let's say, language. I use JavaScript. And I did it with HTML, of course, JavaScript, and also with Node.js that I discovered. First, I discovered this platform, which is amazing. It's one of the biggest ecosystem, very dynamic. Every developer there is a huge community of developers. There are lots of modules, 1.3 million modules, 6 billion loading of these modules every week. There is more than 1 billion of installation of Node.js this year. So it's a very massive system. And the impact of that is the community is very huge and very reactive. When you post a question on Stack Overflow, you have an answer 5 minutes after, which is not the same when we do the same on Java language. So I decided to use this Node.js. And at that time, I was at Google, as I said, and I had access to a very big cloud, Google Cloud. And me, I'm not a cloud guy. I didn't know how to deploy. I know how to build an Android application, but coming to a cloud, it's totally different. I'm not also a very specialist of HTTP layers. And this is why it was very hard for me to create this system. So come me to the idea to look to the alternative solutions for JavaScript developers to develop to the cloud. And then I see that even there are some tentatives, let's say some tryings to reduce the cloud management. It was very hard. Nothing has really changed since a lot of time. 20 years ago, HTTP was created for the W3C, but after that, there is no big changes. And what I wanted is to try to find a new solution. So I quit Google and I left Google, and I was in this desk during 2 weeks to try to fix the base of the solution. And come to me, first point, we should remove the HTTP layers, because as a JavaScript developer, what you want to do is you want to think JavaScript objects. You are not talking about HTTP calls or protocol calls. You have in mind objects. So first thing, remove the HTTP layers. And for that, we did a new dynamic compiler, which is kind of an add-on of V8 compiler, which is the same kind of technology. And that is enabled to develop, you don't do HTTP calls, you do JavaScript calls directly of your servers. And the second point is, I didn't want to learn how to deploy in the cloud. So I asked my guys to create the full NoOps management system where we can deploy on any cloud. And that's come the idea. In fact, I did the platform for me. But I was thinking that it was interesting a lot of other JavaScript guys. They want to go to the cloud, but don't know necessarily how and why. And also, the platform provides a huge productivity system today. So it's also very complementary to everybody already working on the cloud.
Well, I think that ties very well in kind of with the next idea about the how you do what you're doing. So you mentioned a couple of the things that I think are super interesting to developers that are in the Node.js community, where I think many of them are also going to be very interested in cutting out those extra layers that they don't need to, that are kind of repetitive or redundant that they have to keep doing in order to be more efficient. A lot of them might not necessarily be interested in the how of what you do, but I'm sure that there are a number of people that do want to know how you make the magic happen. What's the technology behind your services and making Node.js development this much more efficient?
So we have two pieces. The first one is a new dynamic compiler, as I said. So me, I have a background of virtual machines and compiler technologies. So this is why here we have clearly a new compiler technology, which is built with a static compiler and a dynamic compiler that makes the magic of remove the HTTP layers. And also, instead of transferring JSON objects to your server, you transfer JavaScript objects directly. And this is a real complex technology. It took us 24 months to design it and to have it in place. And then the second point of the technology is this NoOps toolchain, where we can deploy and manage any kind of cloud. So we can go to virtual machines, but we can also go to function as a service systems, Google Functions, AWS Lambda, or whatever. And you don't have to learn anything. In one command line, you deploy on the cloud, and you can monitor what happened on the cloud you have deployed. That's really the two pieces of technology blocks. Of course, the first one, the dynamic compiler, is really, really new. It's a really new innovation and this is why we are the first platform that removes totally the HTTP layers. And this is really a true innovation.
So that then is perfect, because you say that you're the first company that does this, and it's always interesting to see how innovation, you've encountered the problems that caused you to want to build ScaleDynamics, and then you innovated around that. You find that there is competition in certain places. It seems like there is not in this specific place, at least not yet, but how would you distinguish yourself from the competition that does exist, even if they are not, offering exactly the same type platform that you do or the same type tool? I'm curious just, what those differences might be on a competitive level, but also as companies are looking at this, what would be the main, I think, selling points that you would want to underline why companies should choose ScaleDynamics as a development environment for Node.js?
So you can have, if you look to the other competitors, you can see of stuff like Firebase, or you can also go to the serverless guys from the platform team, or you can have also some, let's say, NoOps generic toolchains that you can enable you to deploy Dockers. So in fact, what we have in common is we are the only platform when you don't develop HTTP. So that means that your developers don't have to have any cloud background. And we automatize fully, transparently the cloud provisioning. And so your developer, as a company, if you get a JavaScript developer, he can use he can do the cloud. You don't have to let's say, to hire DevOps guys. You don't have to be highly skilled in cloud skills. Everybody you can know, you can have young people or young developers. So the impact on the budget, on the cost is very huge. Of course, also on the productivity, because you don't have, it removes a lot of code you have in your systems, and you don't have to manage it, to test it, to debug it, to maintain it. So that's cool. About the deployment chain, we are one of the only one that can go anywhere. So we had in mind to go to the serverless and to the dedicated servers. And this is why we are kind of unique, because we can address both transparently, and we can also customize. If someone has, let's say, a private cloud or some very, let's say, requirements on the deployment, we can adjust because we control every piece. It's really designed by ourselves. So this is why, as a company, you have JavaScript guys doing front end. You want to make them full stack. We are very perfect at it. You have a backend guys that want to go to full stack doing front end. We are perfect for this. You already have full stack guys that will love our platform. If you're doing JavaScript on the front and Node.js at the back, of course.
And I think that answer, perfectly kind of answers my next question, which is what kind of companies should call you. But just in case that there are people listening to the podcast that did not see themselves identified or don't identify, as realizing, okay, this is something that I need to bring into my workflow. From your perspective, what kind of companies should reach out and call ScaleDynamics?
So our primary target together, we have lots of traction coming from the startup and the pre-startup guys, because when you have a startup, you have limited resources. You don't have. You want to do fast. You want to create your MVP very fast, and you don't have time to hire. You don't have the budget also to hire DevOps or people that know how to go to the cloud. So this is why currently, if you are a startup, you should really look at us, because we are a perfect machine for that. And also the cost. The overall cost is not only when you create your MVP. The cost also impacts your fundraising, because you need to hire to get less money to get the things done at the end, and you are in better position with investors. This is why the startup is for us our primary target, and we have the other companies that already got their SaaS or their solution or their website, and these ones we cannot modify the core system they already have, but every dashboard, every tool you do around this can be used by our platform. And this is why we have these two people. And the third one is the freelancers or the web agencies that are proposing their services to other companies to develop stuff. Mm-hmm. Freelancers currently don't generally do infogérance, so they don't provide you the hosting part of the project. Now they can do it. They can also provide the hosting part to their customer. So it's bigger market for them, simplified because they don't have to learn anything. It's immediate. And this is why, let's say, you have a startup, you are scaled up with already your product, and you are, let's say, a web agency, you should really look to us if you are convinced, and if you are using JavaScript and Node.js, of course. If you are using PHP, you will not be our customer.
And so I like the two different, so when we're looking at the startup space, definitely efficiency in the beginning is super important, not only because you want to be going faster and getting results as you build out your MVP or build up your application. You want that to be done as fast as possible. That's super important. And so having an efficient platform like what you're offering helps with that, but also the idea then that you need potentially less developers or less developer hours to achieve the MIM results, which has a financial cost to it. So not only in terms of efficiencies on time, but also efficiencies in terms of the human resources, the capital that represents. I think that's fantastic. And I really like the point that even if you already have a platform in place, you already have your workflow or the tools or the other things that you're already doing things a certain way, as you scale and you build new tools, whether those might be internal, management tools, they might be dashboards, whatever those kind of things might be, that this is also a great solution to be able to build efficiently and quickly, leveraging your platform. So that's super interesting in terms of the kind of companies that potentially are just starting and want to build on top of a robust and efficient platform, but also companies that have already scaled up to a point. They're not going to replace that, but they definitely are building new things that they could benefit from.
Yes, it's also very good for agile companies, like feature teams, because today that they do a sprint with 4 people, and they want to try one feature. With us, they can try not one but 4 features in the same week, and they decide the best feature at the end, which is ready to be in production. So it's not only less people, because that's more the situation of the startup, but if you already have a team, you can increase the quality of your software and at the end of your product. So it's not only a way to decrease the resources, it's also finally a way to do better, to do the best for their own customers.
And I think, you've brought up several times the fact that this also makes the cloud computing infrastructure piece of this easier or more understandable, especially if the developers don't have a lot of experience in that kind of deployment environment or experience. So this is the Startup Stories with Scaleway podcast, and so I am very interested in all of what you're building and the needs that means in terms of cloud computing infrastructure. This partnership with through a startup program like with Scaleway, in order to help you scale up your own company and what you're building. So, what does that look like for ScaleDynamics in terms of its own infrastructure needs?
So first, in fact, as I said, our platform is agnostic about the cloud provider, so we can do where we want. But we like to work with cloud providers directly, because we want to be sure that our platform works very good, that works very well on their platform for their own customers, and also that we can tune some of the blocks to be better for them. So at the end, it's like every product, the customer wants to get the best product, and when we resell, in fact, the Scaleway machines, we want the solution works well. So this is why it's very good to be in this program, to be sure that the program works well, and also with the partnerships that we can have with do cross-selling or touch your own customers that want to do faster on JavaScript. So this is good, and we are very happy to have, let's say, with Scaleway, we will open a marketplace of our of infrastructure we support at the end, and of course Scaleway will be in, and we will be very proud because it's a win-win between us.
So I think that's a great point on the idea that if there are customers, if there are startups or other companies that are already clients at Scaleway, that you have a version that is tuned to work specifically with the infrastructure that Scaleway is putting in place. I think that's a great point to underline. And for startups that are kind of investigating which platforms, because generally, at the beginning, you kind of maybe work with everybody and you kind of look at, okay, I want to use some of this and use some of that, especially when there's free stuff or things like that. But you also have to be thinking strategically ahead. Which partner do I want to eventually consolidate behind and scale with as I move forward, both from cost and reliability and all the different things that might happen. And so your position is the ability then to come in and say, if you're working with Scaleway, our platform is not just something that works with Scaleway, it's something that we put effort into to make sure that it works flawlessly, that really is aligned with the infrastructure at Scaleway.
Yes, you're right. So of course we have with our solution, you can also understand that people can move. So and this is very complex in general. Let's say you buy or you rent a small machine, you want to go to a higher machine, your traffic is better. With us, you just have to buy this machine, you connect our platform, and you deploy in one command line, and it's done. So it's kind of magic, but the migration potential of our system is very good also for people and for people to move across machines, to grow and to scale according to their traffic. That's cool.
It's super cool, and and we see that already before the pandemic that cloud computing, people building their own, people wanting to start a startup, people building their own apps, people building their own companies. and whether that whatever that might happen to look like, that cloud computing as the kind of central resource to that was already scaling significantly. But through the pandemic, with people staying home, people being working from a distance and other things, we saw an even bigger peak in people moving towards building more solutions that were using cloud computing technologies. And so I think that there's obviously then that means there's a great future ahead for people like you that are building tools and platforms that make that easier and that create efficiencies in writing, developing, and deploying the solutions out to the cloud. So, given that, and given the scale that we see over the past probably 2-3 years, significantly with things building up in the cloud space, but also as we see things now and moving forward, what are kind of your next big steps at ScaleDynamics? What's coming for you? What's in the pipeline? What can we be excited to see over the next 6 months, next year, next 2 years at ScaleDynamics?
So, okay, good. In fact, our first step currently, so we just launched the commercialization of that platform first, because as you understand, it took us a lot of time to be sure it works well, it's qualified, and it's very stable. So now it is. We started the launch. What our first focus is to start creating the community, and this is why we have a free community plan, because we need the help of the developers to provide us feedback to improve the product, to let's say to create features that are missing or whatever, to have that feedback. And we need a community also to be sure that we have people, a team of people using it. The second point is to go to the first customer base. And this is why we have some agreements, like in the French Tech in France, where we have some peer program for them to have discounts. And we are clearly investigating a lot of efforts to find our first customers using with good references. And this is the second point. Third point is to start building the partners. Because as I said, web agencies are also very interesting to work with us, and we created a specific partner program for them. So for them to be sure that they can take our technology, provide them to their own customers. And so that's the main milestones, the main focus currently. About the product itself, we want still to be in this mind of the management of the cloud should be more simple and still more simple. It's still too complex. So we will create new stuff probably, again, to simplify more this stuff. It can be new analytics, to analyze more what's happening in your system. Then you don't know what you want to know. For example, is what is the latency when I call a server? Is it fast? Is it enough? Do you have issues? Do you have to optimize it? This is the kind of, let's say, developer information you need, not necessarily how many amount of RAM you have in your system. So we are going to do this kind of effort, and also to improve our way to create new templates, project templates ready to be used. So we just launched this week, for example, the Mongo, that's the mean. I don't know if you know this. It's a Mongo Express React node, full stack. And we create the template so people are just to do a Git clone, and they immediately can develop in real time and deploy with the two commands. They don't have to configure anything. They already, they can produce. And we are also in the second improvement with our platform to provide the right tools to achieve these no setup goals. To be sure that when people want to create a React app with a backend, it's immediate. They have everything. They can start. And this is the second, let's say, objective we have in mind.
Well, the benchmarking and the templates, that sounds fantastic as a way to already your tool is to help people be more efficient and to go faster, and now you're building layers on top of that to make the faster go even faster. So I think that's brilliant. And message was heard. So if you are ecosystem like incubators or things like that, you're working with young startups, they need to call you. If you are a young startup, they need to call you. If you're a developer working for other people or an agency, they need to call you. So pretty much everybody who codes should be checking out ScaleDynamics. Obviously, there's a free plan, so it's easy to get started and see if this fits into the workflow and the way that things want to work. That sounds fantastic. Is there anything else that you want to add, kind of to round us out about the story of what you've built, why you've built it, and the value add of what that really brings to developers? Any last thoughts to add?
No, thank you. I think I summarizes. I try to summarize with a French accent what what I had in mind. Uh, Perhaps one stuff. It's we are already open also to. We have a position that when we look to our access statistics of our tool, where we reach, for example, 10,000 developers in 2 months with our playground tool, and the traffic is coming not for France. Traffic is coming massively from US and India. And so we have, let's say, we have a road to go in worldwide, and that's a very cool project. And I'm also very proud of my team, which is making amazing technical stuff to achieve this kind of product. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you. I love to hear all of this great growth that's happening elsewhere in the world. Always love to hear when French tech startups are getting traction outside of France and outside of Europe and scaling up. It sounds like you deserve it. Sounds like you've built a great resource. Thank you so much for this discussion, Gilbert. I learned a ton that was really useful. I wish you all the best in scaling up Scale Dynamics.
Thank you. Bye bye.
All right. And thank you for joining us for this episode of Startup Stories with Scaleway. If you are a startup that uses cloud computing resources, be sure to check out Scaleway's startup program at scaleway.com. Don't forget to subscribe on Apple, Spotify, or your preferred podcast platform, and check out all of the previous episodes of the podcast. Again, thank you for listening, and we will see you next time.